Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Cycle 5858. I am Amish Cycle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
ABC's World News Tonight, America's most watched newscast. Now streaming same day with all the breaking news of the day on Disney Plus. Most watched, most trusted. Now on Disney Plus every night. Tonight, breaking news as we come on this dangerous storm, blinding snow, gusting winds, wind chills in the teens and 20s. Tonight, the whiteout conditions here, up to a foot of snow in some areas, dangerous driving, cars off the road. And tomorrow, wind chills in the 20s and 30s from Minneapolis east to New York City, all the way down to Florida. Legal past the forecast. Also breaking 8,000 flights canceled in just a matter of days, more than 1,200 more flights canceled today alone. And tonight, the FAA says this will continue, even with the House set to vote on the shutdown tomorrow. Angry passengers venting tonight across this country, and President Trump now taking aim at some air traffic controllers who are not getting paid. Tonight, members of the House told to return to Washington after 53 days in recess. They did get paid during this shutdown. The key vote tomorrow on what the Senate has now passed. Some Democrats furious tonight about those 8 Democratic senators who gave in with no deal on extending subsidies to keep health insurance premiums from skyrocketing for millions. And tonight you'll hear the heated town halls over the longest shutdown ever and lawmakers not addressing health care. And just moments ago tonight, the Supreme Court said about food health, about those SNAP benefits, what we've learned. Tonight, startling images appearing to show the operator of a packed commuter train falling asleep at the controls. That train traveling up to 50 miles per hour, video showing frightened passengers being thrown back and forth. New lawsuits tonight with disturbing claims against the owners of Camp Mystic in Texas. Families of some of the 27 girls and counselors who died in that devastating flood, saying their deaths were entirely preventable. What they claim happened when counselors in those cabins began sounding the alarm, asking for help. Tonight, here's the tributes pouring in for Oscar-nominated actress Sally Kirkland, fiercely independent, best known for her roles in Anna and The Sting. Tonight, the incredible rescue at sea, Americans among the passengers floating in the water, their boat sinking during an excursion. The terrifying image tonight is C-130 cargo plane breaking apart in midair, falling from the sky. Dramatic video tonight showing the collapse of a new bridge just months after it reopened. And on this Veterans Day, as we do every year, we join Bob and Lee Woodruff to stand up for heroes. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News. Canada reflects, respects, and remembers. The critical reminders for the next generation.
Control will happen to them this, the way things are going in the world.
And the ceremony honoring Indigenous veterans.
They didn't get the recognition they deserved.
Also on this Tuesday, a snowy surprise in southern Quebec.
We could trade between the leaf blower and the shovel.
The mess, the misery, and the power outages. Plus the agreement to finally end America's longest government shutdown.
This is a disaster all across the board.
Why it's not a done deal and how it's causing political infighting. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Across the country, Canadians pause to reflect and remember today in a ritualized moment where grief and gratitude coexist. At the National War Memorial in Ottawa, veterans, their families and supporters, plus dignitaries and the Silver Cross Mother gathered to mark Remembrance Day. This is Mark Carney's first Remembrance Day as Prime Minister. In a statement, he said, "Today we honor the service of the brave women and men who answered the call, those who sacrificed years away from loved ones, those who returned from combat forever changed, those who never came home. In an increasingly dangerous and divided world, remembrance is also vigilance." Our chief political correspondent David Aiken was also in the crowd and has our top story tonight.
raging radicals risk the future? That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, the socialist, progressive, agitator wing of the Democrat Party, they thought they had it made. A new multicultural hipster took New York by storm. Virginia voters chose a fake moderate, and New Jersey, well, that just continued to be New Jersey. But Democrats had all the momentum. They had the edge. And they thought they had the leverage. But that all went up in smoke with the shutdown deal.
We actually use leverage in our fight for Americans. Now that we have capitulated Donald Trump without any real protections for people's health care or our democracy in the short-term funding bill, the pressure was going to mount on Donald Trump and Republicans over the next few days and weeks to do something.
But it turns out there are a lot of Democrat voters who are sick of waiting for 6 hours at the airport only to have their flights canceled, and a lot of government workers are Democrats, and they weren't getting paid. All for their little stunt. So rather than re-examining the wisdom of their shutdown hostage drama, Trump-hating maniacs near and far threw tantrums and took it all out on the adults in the room.
This was a decision made by Intel. They clearly had a momentum. They clearly had their own goals.
I can't believe it! Democrats, you sold out the entire shutdown not to get what you wanted, but for a promise to not get what you wanted later.
Then when that all didn't work, of course, they tried to find their fall guy. Of course, the squad is stamping their feet, demanding that Schumer step down. They think that he stalled their election night momentum. Now they just caved and surrendered. I think Chuck Schumer, his days are over.
I think he is in bigger trouble now. I think Senator Schumer's been there since 1982. My guess is that he will be leader of the party in 2027.
Leadership of the Democratic Party in many respects is way out of touch with where Democrats in general are.
Okay, it's never about policy. Do you notice it's always about messaging or strategy? Because did they actually think that Democrats were going to get more popular the more they continued to vote against reopening the government? And the closer we got to Thanksgiving, how does that make any sense? Now, President Trump last night offered his own diagnosis of Chuck's problems, and it wasn't that Schumer didn't fight hard enough, it's that he let the inmates run the asylum.
Just went too far. He thought he could break the Republicans and the Republicans.
Tonight, the powerful winter blast, snow, ice, and freezing temperatures sending early winter shockwaves through much of the country. Heavy snow pounding parts of the East Coast, cars and trucks spinning out, hundreds of crashes reported. This semi-truck left in pieces after being hit by a train, and the brutal cold freezing out the South. Beachgoers bundling in Florida, and frozen iguanas falling from trees. More drastic cuts at the nation's airports. More than 1,000 flights canceled again today, and the warning, it could get much worse if the government doesn't reopen. Those cuts impacted the race back to Washington for members of Congress, with a key vote to end the shutdown set for tomorrow. One House member even riding his motorcycle all the way from Wisconsin. But the question tonight, do Republicans have the votes to reopen the government? Show of force, the Pentagon's largest aircraft carrier arrives in the Latin American region. Richard Anga on the ground in Colombia, with the fishermen now more worried about taking their boats into the water. Dozens of tourists rescued after their catamaran sunk off the coast of the Dominican Republic. Life preservers trying to save passengers stranded at sea. The president's controversial proposal: could a 50-year mortgage help more Americans afford homes? We crunch the numbers. Massive bridge collapse, a landslide, sending rocks hurtling down, crushing a bridge just months after it opened. The terrifying moments of tram moves past stops because of a dozing conductor. And on this Veterans Day, the World War II vet reminding us all of the power of service for both country and community. Nightly News starts right now. This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Youngins.
Jeff Bennett.
I'm Amna Navaz. On the NewsHour tonight, the deal to end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history now sits in the hands of the House of Representatives.
A prominent conservative judge resigns to protest what he calls President Trump's assault on the rule of law.
This president repeatedly, overtly directs the Department of Justice to prosecute his perceived political enemies.
And our series, Rethinking College, explores how universities are trying to navigate unprecedented demands from the Trump administration.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Gooden. The U.S. federal government shutdown has entered its 42nd day. Monday, senators ratified a deal with Republican senators to approve a bill to reopen the government and end the longest shutdown in U.S. history. The bill notably does not include an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, as Senate Majority Leader John Thune has agreed to a separate vote on them. The measure now heads to the House, which has not been in session since mid-September. The House vote on the spending package could come as early as Wednesday afternoon. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders called the vote a horrific mistake. Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries vowed to stand firm on the issue of health care subsidies.
We're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. And we're going to continue the fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And if it doesn't happen this week, next week, this month, next month, then it's the fault of Donald Trump, House and Senate Republicans, who continue to make life more expensive for the American people.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration again informed the Supreme Court that it wants to prevent a lower court ruling requiring full food benefits under SNAP. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to be.
The bill as amended is passed.
Using planes, trains, and automobiles, members of the House rush back to the seat of a shutdown government to try to open it up.
Also tonight, a manufacturer recalls all its organic baby formula as a botulism outbreak spreads.
The U.S. is threatening big tariffs that could raise the price and cut the supply of pasta imported from Italy.
Raising prices 107% is worrisome, especially for pasta.
17 years in the Army, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. All up! And saluting America's fallen heroes with precision, dignity, and eternal gratitude.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening.
Hello, you're watching Sky News Today. Me, Jane Second. It's 1 o'clock. These are the headlines.
The hashtag tweet Facebook Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister's challenged on the streets and in the Commons as Westminster is dominated by talk of plots to oust Sir Keir Starmer from Downing Street.
2 weeks from the budget, the government has descended into civil war.
I've never authorised attacks on cabinet members. I appointed them to their posts because they're the best people to carry out their jobs.
Coming up later this hour, the Health Secretary, who denied challenging the PM's leadership, will be outlining his latest plans for NHS reform. We'll bring you his speech live. Plus, the government apologises after a report finds decades of abuse at a County Durham detention centre was ignored by the authorities.
Hell on earth. Every day was hell on earth. Every day and night was hell on earth for the full 9.5 weeks. Because the violence, what they were doing here, it was disgusting.
They need to get their house in order. The message from the Prime Minister to the BBC as Donald Trump says he feels obliged to sue the broadcaster. And on the people smuggling front line, as 42 people are presumed dead after a boat capsizes off Libya, we go on the route known as the most dangerous path to Europe. A lot of desperation and urging us. They think we've got something to do with it, and they're urging us to take them to Europe. Hello, good afternoon. The Prime Minister's been forced to deny authorisation. A marathon Liberal Party room meeting on net zero emissions as the government announces a historic defence treaty with Indonesia. I'm Patricia Carvelis, live from the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Melbourne. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. Liberal MPs and senators are yet to emerge from a meeting at Parliament House where they've been hashing out a position on net zero emissions. The party was forced into a corner by their coalition partner, the Nationals, who made a decision to scrap their climate commitments earlier this month. It's likely the Liberals will follow suit on at least one target, net zero by 2050, but it remains to be seen whether shorter-term goals will also be toppled. An extravagant welcome for Indonesia's president this morning was followed by news of a new bilateral security treaty. Prabowo Subianto was treated to a full military salute before joining Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on a tour of a Sydney naval base. The new treaty commits Australia and Indonesia to consulting on a regular basis on matters of security and taking joint action if either is threatened. We're going to speak to the Lowy Institute and the Assistant Defence Minister about that. And former construction union boss John Secker has been arrested and charged with threatening an administrator appointed to the CFMEU's construction branch. The federal government forced the union into administration in August last year amid allegations its leadership had engaged in bullying, corruption and criminal infiltration. Mr Secker was charged with 7 offences and released on bail in Melbourne this morning. So as we go to air,
Headline news this hour. Australia and Indonesia agreed to a new landmark security deal as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese welcomes President Prabowo Subianto to Sydney. The pact commits the neighbours to consult each other should either be threatened and allow them to take measures to deal with those threats. The treaty is set to be formally signed next year. Meanwhile, Beijing slams Canberra for irresponsible remarks after Australia's spy chief says hackers working for the Chinese government, military and government had probed telecom networks and critical infrastructure. The Chinese Foreign Ministry accuses Mike Burgess of spreading falsehoods and provoking confrontation. China adds that it has lost representations to Australia. Thailand says it is extraditing wanted gambling kingpin suspect Shi Zhejiang to China after a local court earlier this week upheld the transfer order following a 3-year legal battle. Thai police say the 43-year-old Chinese national, who also holds a Cambodian passport, will be handed over to China to stand trial for operating illegal casinos and gambling websites using Myanmar as a base for these illegal operations and for money laundering. And ahead next hour, East Asia Tonight, Oteli Edwards is here to tell us what we can expect.
Thanks, Paul. Coming up, Tropical Storm Fang Wong set to bear down on Taiwan. Our correspondent with the latest on just how bad it could get. No sign of tensions easing between China and Japan after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. In fact, calls to expel a Chinese envoy are growing louder. And President Xi Jinping woos Spain as King Philippe IV visits Beijing. How much sway does Madrid have as China's trade frictions with Europe deepens? All on East Asia Tonight with me, Oteli Edwards. Less than an hour from now, right here on CNA.
African youth. The news.
In Sudan's North Darfur, new accounts from women fleeing the city of Al Fasher reveal horrifying scenes of violence and abuse after its capture by the paramilitary rapid support forces. According to UN Women, survivors describe killings, systematic rape, and the disappearance of children, atrocities that unfolded as the RSF cemented its control over the Darfur region in its brutal war with the Sudanese army. The UN's Women's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa says sexual violence is now being used deliberately and systematically as a weapon of war. The situation is equally dire for those still trapped. Around 11 million women and girls are facing acute food insecurity. Many risk sexual violence even while searching for wild leaves and berries to eat. Famine has now been declared in Al Fasher and the southern city of Kunduli. Since late October, at least 82,000 people have fled Al Fasher and surrounding areas, but aid agencies estimate as many as 200,000 civilians remain trapped inside the besieged city.
The United Nations called for an investigation into the alleged killings of hundreds of people in protests that erupted during last month's disputed elections in Tanzania. The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk on Tuesday said there was an apparent attempt from the government to conceal evidence of protesters' death. This accusation follows reports that security forces were secretly dumping bodies of those killed in the violence. Volker Turk urged authorities to release bodies to families for funerals. The main opposition party, Chadema, has said that about 2,000 people were killed during 3 days of protest following the disputed poll. The government has yet to give an official death toll. The UN said hundreds of people are believed to have been killed. The call for a probe comes as Tanzanian authorities have charged hundreds of people with treason over these demonstrations. Wanted suspects include an influential preacher who had his church deregistered earlier this year after he criticized the government over rights abuses. Police have also issued arrest warrants for some of the nation's top opposition officials who hadn't yet been detained. Chadema leader Tundu Lissu has already been jailed for several months and also faces treason charges after he called for electoral reforms ahead of last month's vote. Researchers and scientists in South Africa on Tuesday have launched clinical trials on the first domestically manufactured vaccine in over 50 years. The oral cholera vaccine is being developed by the Cape Town-based pharmaceutical firm Biovac. Authorities have described the clinical trials as a milestone in Africa's ability to fully produce vaccines for itself. Of the vaccine to participants.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.